Hi, my name is Frank. Welcome back to Channel 33 RPM, your channel for vinyl, gear, and more, where I try to put the fun back in record collecting. You saw that off the top. This is another all-new episode of AMA Ask Me Anything. I had so much fun with the first episode. I thought I want to tackle this again sooner rather than later. So let's get right to the questions. Benjamin writes, what metal albums should I get into if I'm just getting into metal? Talk about a can of worms, Ben. I mean, there's so many places you could start. The whole thing with metals, there's so many genres and sub-genres. What did I hear about the other day? It was like Viking metal. I mean, there's so many labels for this kind of stuff now, but I am old school. So I'm going to stick with some of the classics that I grew up with that I would recommend anyone getting into metal would start with these ones because I think they served me well. So first you need some Ozzy. I'd recommend Ozzy, and I would go with Blizzard of Oz, his first solo album featuring the late great Randy Rhoads on guitar. A fantastic album from beginning to end. Talking about getting into metal, I would say you need some Iron Maiden, and this is a hard one. Where do you start? If you want to get into metal, where do you start with Iron Maiden? I'd probably go for one of the most popular albums. That's their 1982 release. Number of the Beast, first album with Bruce Dickinson on lead vocals, producing great tracks. Of course, everyone knows Number of the Beast and Run to the Hills, but there's also lesser known tracks on there like Children of the Damned, which are fantastic, and that really helped set the stage for 1980s metal. So number 2, I would say Number of the Beast. Next, you need Black Sabbath, of course, the pioneers of heavy metal. I go with the debut album from 1970. Those guys single-handedly, with that record, I think anyway, invented heavy metal. So that, I would think, is essential for anyone getting into the genre. Next, I think you need to put some thrash into the mix. So you can put some Slayer, maybe some Anthrax, maybe some Metallica. You're thinking of just getting into metal, so I would go with the biggest of those bands and I'm tongue-tied, and suggest Metallica. Now, you can't really go wrong with any of Metallica's first 3 albums, being Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master Puppets. However, of those 3, my favorite, the one I think is a heavy metal masterpiece, is definitely Master of Puppets. Finally, and just come up with 5 albums to get into metal with is such a daunting task, but my last one on the list I would suggest is Pantera's Cowboys from Hell, which kind of brings us into the whole new era of metal in the 1990s of Dimebag Darrell ripping up the guitar. Check out, if you haven't already, Pantera Cowboys from Hell. Okay, next on the list comes from Alexander, who writes, do you think that vinyl sounds the best, or is it a preference? I collect all 3 formats, vinyl, cassettes, and CDs, and although I love vinyl and it has its own classic style, I still think CDs are the best bang for your buck. This is a big question, Alexander. I, like you, collect various formats. I collect records, I collect CDs, and I collect cassettes. So your first part of your question, do you truly think vinyl sounds best? I'm going to say, in many circumstances, yes. And I showed this one in the last AMA episode with the David Bowie Let's Dance album. I remember sitting here and I got a fairly decent CD player, and I was listening to Let's Dance, that song, and it sounded good, but I just wasn't feeling it. So I went and turned that off and put that track on vinyl. And it was like day or night, and it was a much better experience. It's a much more lively listen, but that isn't always the case. I definitely have some CDs that sound better than the record and some that sound the same. So it's really a case-by-case basis, but in general, I do think vinyl sounds better. Of course, we know it has limitations. We know there's the whole snap, crackle, and pop, which some people profess to love, but I can't stand. So yeah, as I said, in general, I think vinyl sounds better. The last part of your question I want to quickly talk about, where you say, I still think CDs are the best bang for your buck. I can't disagree with you there. We talked about this recently. CDs are literally pennies on the dollar. They are the best deal out there for physical music right now. Okay, next question comes from Lucas, and he writes, for the same price, would you prefer a used copy or a new reissue of an album? So this is a good one. This one I'm giving a lot of thought to, because this is a really, really hard question to answer. Would I want a used copy or a new reissue for the same price? I mean, there's so many different factors at play here. The first being condition, of course, and price being the other one. Generally, I prefer to get the original pressing of an album, but oftentimes the condition is garbage, or the price is just way too expensive. So if we equalize all that, I suppose I would go for the original pretty much any time, but in reality that's not always feasible, again, because of price and condition. So personally nowadays I find myself buying more reissues just for those very reasons. And I'm going on here. Lucas, have I even answered your question? This next one comes from Ralph, and Ralph writes, "Hey brother, what's up? Sitting around spinning and was wondering what was your first concert." You can see mine below, and he had some pictures of his ticket stubs. I'm not sure if I've talked about this on this channel before, but my very first concert was July, I believe, 16th, 1986 at the old Winnipeg Arena. Me and my friend Chris Hunter saw Judas Priest on the Fuel for Life World Tour. My dad took us. I was 12 years old. I was almost 13. And believe it or not, Bon Jovi opened. They had just recorded an album called Slippery When Wet, which you may have heard of in Vancouver. And they went on a brief Western Canadian tour opening for Priest, kind of getting warmed up, trying out the new songs, whatnot. Bon Jovi did not go over very well with the Judas Priest crowd, but still a great show. We were in the 16th row, from what I remember. My dad kind of was with us when Bon Jovi was on. Afterwards, he just kind of gave up, said, "You boys have fun." He stood at the back of the arena when Priest came on, and we just rocked out. It was a fantastic show, and that was a great first concert to see. Okay, and now we are leaving with a question from Paul Kane, who says, "If you could vacation anywhere in the world for 10 days, including travel, all expenses paid, where would you go and what would you do?" This is another one of those questions. You guys have been getting me with some hard questions here. Where would I go? Did he say this is all expenses paid? Okay, because that is important. There's two places I would go to. One would either be, there's two places I'd like to go to given that scenario. One is Tokyo, Japan, and two is Australia. I'm not really sure where in Australia. Maybe Sydney, somewhere in Australia. Actually, if I was in Australia, I'd do more than one city because that is literally half a world away from here. So Tokyo, I'm not a fan of seafood, so the food I'm not sure I'd be crazy about, but it just sounds like a really cool place. The record stores in particular sound fantastic. I'd love to go digging for records there and just experiencing that whole Japanese Tokyo culture. That would probably be number one. In Australia, I have a lot of Australian viewers. I watch some YouTube videos with people in Australia talking about record collecting and whatnot. Australians just seem like really cool people, and Australia, like Canada, is a Commonwealth country, so there's that tie, that bond as well. But I just think it'd be a cool place to visit. And after watching The Simpsons, I learned that the toilets in Australia flush the opposite way of here. I'm not sure why I said that. Anyway, I definitely want to check out one or both of those two places, and I hope to one day check them off. They're both on my bucket list for sure. Okay, there's my second episode of AMA. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Feel free to disagree and weigh in with your opinions below as well. Or if you have your own question you'd like to see me answer in a future episode of Ask Me Anything, leave that below this video as well. Besides that, I hope you have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here again really soon. Until then, keep on spinning.